Hey guys, and welcome back. Today is day 2 of my 30-day video challenge, and today I was driving to work and I'm like, what are we going to talk about today? So, I feel like there's like a million things I can talk about when it comes to emotions and trauma and basically moving from, I'm still trying to decide my slogan and brand, but I'm pretty sure it's moving from surviving to thriving, and that's like a coined term that became really popular with the author Pete Walker. And today I wanted to go over 5 books that have really helped me and have helped thousands of people that you should really know about if you don't already know about them, and you're trying to, even if you're not recovering from trauma and you're just maybe trying to understand yourself on a deeper level, these books will really help you. Especially if you've come from a dysfunctional family. So the first one is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And early in my recovery, this book pretty much saved my life. I remember I was living in my landlord's guest house, and she gave me this book, and I was super resistant in the beginning of my recovery, like a lot of us are, and the family denial was just so thick. And when she gave me this, she would always give me books. She gave me Melody Beattie's Codependent No More and all this stuff, and I was like, what is this girl trying to do? But once she handed me that ACA big book, I just started crying. It's like somebody had been walking around following me my whole life. And basically the book is a big book for a 12-step group, but it talks about a lot of, it basically focuses on 2 main themes, which is shame and trauma. And as a result, it talks about trauma responses, and it does it in this 12-step format. So even if you're not interested in attending 12-step groups, it's a really, really good book. So you can sample this book on Kindle if you just want to look at a few pages, or you can go to your local like used bookstore and look at it. And I'm pretty sure like Barnes and Noble might even have it. So super awesome book. So the next book I really want to put out there is John Bradshaw's The Shame That Binds You, and this book has been around forever, and I actually just read it fully. Actually, I'm still in the middle of it. I'm listening to it. I think for the second time. I read it for the first time, but not as consciously, so to speak. But I'm listening to it again for the second time on Audible. And this, his approach is pretty much a deep dive, no bullshit approach to toxic shame. And so I feel like a lot of people who go into this field, they talk about things on this level, like up here, emotionally, and John Bradshaw basically takes it all the way down here, and he really addresses, I feel like the unspoken dark side and shadow of the family of origin, and how this is basically injected into people who come out of families, and what it does. And I feel like, if you've wondered about certain things and you're ready to address some deeper emotions, I feel like Bradshaw he just really takes you there, and he takes you there gently, and he just describes things in the most perfect way, like the results of toxic shame. For me, a lot of things that came out of my stuff was perfectionism, and that manifested in so many different ways, and it has a lot to do with how we treat ourselves and our internal dialogues, which we usually internalize as a result of somebody in our family who treated us a certain way, or just what we learned implicitly or explicitly. So sometimes the no talk rule, the no talk, don't trust, and don't feel, those are those are often implicit rules, and the ACA book actually goes into that as well. Implicit meaning it's like no one comes up to you and tells you this. Sometimes it does happen, but sometimes, like from in my family of origin, it's just like, you know, the emotional affect of the face just was like never mirrored. It was always met with like this blank face, and you could be crying in front of somebody, and like no one was there to like mirror that, and that's super damaging for emotional intelligence. So he goes into all of that, and how, you know, just because you weren't hit or, you know, sexually violated or anything, it doesn't mean that you can't end up with some traumatic makeup. So I really like that book. And so Brene Brown, there's not a specific book I would recommend by her. I think all of her stuff is really good. But I think it was when I saw her TED Talk on vulnerability and shame. And it was back in 2015. I went to go work for this really big treatment center. And I actually had we're only in 2018. I've been on a crazy healing journey for like almost the last 4 years. And I actually didn't know what shame was. Like, I literally didn't know. So here I was, like, walking around with toxic shame all the time, but I didn't know what it was. And in fact, my shame was like so bad that when I went to talk therapy, I couldn't talk about it because I would have this internal filter like telling me I couldn't say certain things. And obviously for therapy, that's not good because it's not something that I was even aware of, and definitely the therapist wasn't aware of. So that's just an interesting backdrop. But anyways, I went to go to this treatment center, and that's when I found out about Brene Brown. They actually had me teach this whole group on shame resiliency and talk about the stars aligning. I just found that so ironic that someone who has no idea is given this curriculum to teach, and I was really, from there, just, you know, I was set off. Like, basically, there was a fire that was lit in me. Like, I knew, like, it all happened at once. Like, I was having this existential crisis, and then go to this treatment center that I probably should be in the treatment center, but I'm actually facilitating stuff. And then I also found out about John Bradshaw there. We watched his shame and addiction video, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'll try and find it and put a link in below. So yeah, she's like, you know, she's a 21st century like shame researcher, advocate for shame. Like, you know, she's a huge voice for people. So I would really look into her. The next one that I wanted to bring up, the next person, is Dr. Gabor Mate. And I think Brene Brown is technically Dr. Brene Brown too, because she has a PhD, so Dr. Brene Brown. The next one, Dr. Gabor Mate, I think that's how you say his name, but he's actually a medical doctor. He spent years and years and years working with people who were addicted to opiates in Canada. And I love this guy because he's, I'll throw out a phrase of him. He says, you will compromise your authenticity to preserve attachment. You will compromise your authenticity to preserve attachment. And this happens in childhood all the time to all of us. Because when you're a child, you have to survive. There's no other choice. It's not like, you know, I love John Bradshaw says, it's not like you could have packed your bags when you were 4 years old and then like, screw you guys, you're crazy. Because that's the truth. Like, and I just did a podcast too on how the family of origin, if abusive, is almost like a cult. And I know that sounds far-fetched, but I'll post it also below so you can kind of like, you know, I think it's a different perspective, because we in the Western world, you know, we are very individually driven, but it's funny because our culture projects this like perfect family image, and it's completely false. And there's this like implicit expectation that the family unit should always stay together no matter what. And, it's like, why do you tolerate certain things as an adult in your family that you would never tolerate in friendships? So to me, I've always thought about that. And it's really important to, if you're at that point that you need to set boundaries with certain family members, that you just do it, because no one else is going to do it for you. I'm totally going on a tangent. Anyway, so Dr. Gabor Mate, he's pretty much the shit. And so he's a trauma and addiction expert. So he asks the question, like, not why the addiction, why the pain? Because the addiction has to do with the pain, and usually any outward manifestation of anything is usually pain oriented, because trauma is pain, and unaddressed trauma will continue to be pain in the mind and the body. So he's also a huge ayahuasca advocate, which I am as well, and that makes me extremely excited that someone in his position is a voice for ayahuasca. So I'll do a whole nother video on that. But and then last but definitely not least is Pete Walker, his book CPTSD, Surviving to Thriving. I found out about this book actually late last year in December of 2017. Wow, from a really good friend of mine, and I have completely changed in how I do my work with people, how I look at, some of the things in myself, and it's basically like the PTSD Bible is what I would say. It's information, but also coping skill driven. So it really gives you reasoning, because humans, we want reasons for why we are the way we are. So Pete Walker really, in terms of how he addresses his audience, there's a reason why you're constantly moving and you can't sit, because you're trying to avoid your problems. Or anyway, that's in reference to trauma hybrids. So we all have, as a result of our trauma, we have a certain way we relate to ourselves in life. So I was a flight type for a long time. I still kind of am, but it's definitely in a more positive way. So flight type meaning like you're just go, 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 there's more description to it, but basically, so the core belief with that is, I'm not good enough. So if I'm not good enough, then definitely my accomplishments outside of myself, well, I can only speak for me, my accomplishments outside of myself will make me look like I'm good enough, but that still will never achieve the internal peace, right, that one needs without all this stuff. So, so I've had to work through that, and just basically breaking the chains of years and years. In the past, I had a really severe eating disorder and a really unhealthy relationship with exercise, and just achieving, and it's like, for who, for what, so once you're able to break through those barriers, it's pretty awesome, because then you realize it doesn't matter what I do, I'm good just as I am. So so more on his book. It covers everything, just like John Bradshaw's, but in this more like direct coping skill kind of way. So it covers like the family of origin, sibling rivalry, I don't know how to say that word. It covers addiction briefly. It covers a ton of coping skills, like how meditation's really important. John Bradshaw's really big on the inner child as well. P. Walker goes, especially in this book, he goes into it in a little deeper way, but basically the inner child and the reparenting work and how important that is. And then he talks about, I think a lot of curriculums talk about interpersonal skills, but I like the way he frames it, which is, reparenting by committee. So basically, having people in your life who totally understand where you're coming from, they will never judge you. And I think that's like, man, that I feel like that piece really runs deep when you actually engage in that process of, starting to reveal your true self to somebody, and they completely accept you and they don't judge you, and it's consistent. It's like, whoa, didn't even know this existed. and I And you'll notice that I make jokes a lot because, like, when you grow up in a family where that's not happening and then it actually does happen, your mind's, like, blown. You're like, what? So anyway, I just find that funny. So yeah, talks about reparenting inner child. Talks about what to do during an emotional flashback, which I think is actually really important. I used to have these all the time. Recently, they've been less and less and less because I've been doing a lot of other work that I'll go into, but emotional flashback is basically when you're triggered and you're in the fight or flight, and there's no actual flashes like running through your head or images, but just emotionally you're done. You're hijacked, the lights are on, nobody's home. And this could be anything. I mean, people can trigger you, and you can go into an emotional flashback. So basically what Pete Walker teaches you is on a cognitive level and also a physiological level, 13 steps, I think, to get out of an emotional flashback. So I really like that about him as well. This video is going a little long, so we'll just kind of wrap it up. And then bonus, if you want a bonus book, Creating Love by John Bradshaw. If you're single, if you're in a relationship, if you want to get in a relationship, but you definitely think you're not ready for a relationship, I think this is really good in reading because it basically talks about how often people are presenting a false self in relationships, and then like years down the road, their relationship crumbles and they wonder why, because they present the false self the entire time. So he talks about how that's mystified love, and we learn about mystified love in The Family of Origin. And basically he teaches you how to demystify yourself. How can you be more authentic in a relationship? So as you can see, these words are changed around a lot. Like ACA talks a lot about the false self and the inner child being the true self. John Bradshaw says that too. Yeah, Brene Brown says that. Basically, shame causes you to present a false self, and a form of ego defenses, traumatic makeup presentation, anything that's not you. Gabor Mate talks a lot about that. Gabor Mate was a flight type, achieving, basically being a workaholic, and that's not a true self, right? That's just, I'm a human doing, and you like me for what I'm doing. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So 5 books, 5 people that you can get into, and I hope you guys have a good day. Namaste. Have a good holiday. That rhymed. Bye.